The chamber door slammed open behind me. 3 seconds later, 12 voices screamed at once. I did not flinch. I walked forward across the polished black floor of the obsidian spire, my boots clicking softly with every step. Above me, rising in a massive curved wall, sat the High Council of the Galactic Conquered. 12 species, 12 thrones carved from crystal and bone and living metal, 12 sets of eyes, all fixed on me. I was the only human in the room. I was also the only one who was smiling. High Arbiter Thassun slammed his long gray hand against the stone of his dais. The sound echoed like a hammer. "Commander Ilya Vance," he said, his voice shaking with something that was almost rage and almost fear. "You will answer for this. You will answer now." I stopped walking. I looked up at him. I kept smiling. "I am here, High Arbiter," I said. "Ask your questions. I am listening." The air itself felt heavy. The Obsidian Spire was a neutral station built centuries ago to orbit a dead star at the edge of conquered space. A place of peace, they called it. Today, it felt like a storm about to break. Thassun leaned forward, his long face pale as old paper. "The Vix Dominion has attacked your people. They struck your colony on the frontier, Kepler's Reach. 80,000 of your citizens gone. Wiped from existence in a single night." I did not answer. I already knew. I had known for 6 weeks. Arbiter Kiva spoke next, her voice softer but her eyes hard as stone. "For 300 years, the Vix have terrorized the Rim. They have struck 17 peaceful worlds. They have killed billions. And for 300 years, the Conquered has done nothing, because the Vix home world sits inside a gravity storm that no fleet can survive." I nodded slowly. "I am aware. But now," she said, "they have struck your people. And the humans, as we have learned over the past 40 years, are not like the rest of us. The humans do not forget. The humans do not forgive. The humans do not hesitate." Thassun stood. His long robes fell around him like falling water. He raised one trembling hand and pointed at me. "Wipe them out," he said. His voice was no longer soft. It was a command. "Wipe out the Vix. End this threat forever. You are the only species crude enough, fierce enough, stubborn enough to do it. The Conquered gives you its full authority. We will send fleets. We will send weapons. We will send every resource we have." The chamber went silent. 12 sets of eyes watched me. 12 voices waited for my answer. They expected me to rage. They expected me to weep. They expected me to demand blood and fire. I did none of those things. I looked up at Thassun. I looked at Kiva. I looked at every single counselor in that chamber, one by one, taking my time. I kept my voice calm. I kept my face quiet. And then I said the words that would be remembered for the next 1,000 years. "You are already gone." Thassun blinked. His mouth opened slightly. "What?" "Not you," I said gently. "The Vix. They are already gone. They just haven't noticed yet." For a long moment nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 12 species, all older and wiser and more powerful than mine, sat frozen on their thrones, trying to understand. Finally, Kiva spoke very softly. "Commander, what do you mean?" I turned toward the chamber door. I began walking away. "I mean exactly what I said, Arbiter. You asked humanity to wipe out the Vix. You are 6 weeks too late. The work is already done." The chamber erupted behind me. Voices shouting. Counselors demanding answers. Guards moving forward, uncertain whether to stop me or bow me. I did not look back. I walked out through the massive doors, and they slid shut behind me, cutting off the noise. In the quiet corridor outside, my aide was waiting. Lieutenant Mara Kell. Young, barely 24. Sharp, quick, honest. She stood against the wall with her arms crossed, her dark hair tied back, her uniform perfectly pressed. When she saw my face, her eyes narrowed. "Sir," she said, "you look like someone who just dropped a bomb and walked away whistling." Something like that. She fell into step beside me as I headed toward the docking bay. "What happened in there?" "They demanded that we destroy the Vix," I said. "I told them we already had." She stopped walking. I took 2 more steps before I realized she wasn't beside me anymore. I turned. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, her face pale. "Sir," she said slowly, "I have read every briefing you have ever sent. I have sat in every meeting. I know every human military operation currently active in this galaxy, and I can tell you right now, no such operation exists." "I know," I said. "That's because you weren't told." Her jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because only 7 people on Earth knew. And now you're the 8th. I started walking again. After a long moment, she followed. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. I raised my wrist. On the small screen of my communicator, a timer was counting down. 6 hours. 5 hours. 59 minutes. 58. "In 6 hours," I said, "every Vic in this galaxy will wake up alone. They won't know each other. They won't remember who they are. They won't remember what they were building, what they were planning, or why they struck Kepler's reach. The Vic's dominion as a civilization will simply cease to exist." Mara walked beside me in silence for nearly a full minute. "How?" she finally asked. "I can't tell you here. Not on this station. But when we're safe aboard our ship, I'll tell you everything. I promise." We reached the docking bay. Our shuttle was waiting, a small silver craft shaped like a blade. 2 Marines in dark gray uniforms saluted. I returned the salute. Mara climbed in first. I followed. As the door closed behind us, I looked back one last time at the obsidian spire. The ancient station loomed in the darkness, its black surface reflecting the red light of the dead star. Inside, 12 counselors were still shouting at each other, still trying to understand. They didn't know yet, but they would. The shuttle lifted off. I sat down in the co-pilot seat. Mara sat across from me, her eyes still full of questions. "Sir," she said, "one more thing. If the Vics are already finished, why did you smile when Thassun demanded we end them?" I looked out the window. The dead star hung in the darkness, like a black eye watching the galaxy. Below us, the spire grew smaller and smaller. I thought about 80,000 people on Kepler's reach. I thought about the ones who had died, and the ones who had lived, and the ones who had planned for 40 years to make sure this day would come. "Because, Mara," I said softly, "for 40 years, I've been waiting to say those words. And I wanted to mean them." The shuttle turned toward deep space. The stars swept past the windows in a long silver blur. And somewhere far across the galaxy, inside a fortress that no fleet could ever reach, the Vic's dominion was dying. They didn't know it yet. They wouldn't know it for 6 more hours. But the counting had already begun. Mara didn't speak for the first 10 minutes of the flight. She sat across from me in the small cabin, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the wall behind my head. I let her have the silence. She needed it. I had just told her that an entire civilization was ending, and she was trying to fit that fact into a mind trained to believe such things were impossible. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. That was one of the things I liked about her. She didn't panic. She processed. "Start at the beginning," she said. I leaned back in my seat. 40 years ago, humanity made first contact with the Galactic conquered. Do you remember what they called us back then? "The rough species," she said. "The young ones. The crude apes." "Yes." "They thought we were dangerous because we were angry, because we had fought wars among ourselves for thousands of years. But here's the thing they never understood about us. We didn't fight because we were strong. We fought because we were weak." She listened. The shuttle hummed quietly around us. For most of our history, humans were small animals on a dangerous planet. We weren't the fastest. We weren't the biggest. We didn't have claws or poison or armor. Every other animal could kill us easily. So we did the only thing we could do. We got smart. And we got patient. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small data chip, placing it on the table between us. A lion chases an animal for 10 minutes and gives up. A human chases it for 10 hours or 10 days or 10 years. We don't stop. We don't forget. And when we finally catch up to the thing we're hunting, we bring tools the animal never imagined. Mara picked up the chip, turned it over in her fingers. And the Vicks didn't understand this.
No.
None of them did. The conquered looked at us and saw warriors, brutes, simple angry apes who would burn ourselves out. They never imagined what we would do with 40 years and a grudge. I took a breath. 40 years ago, a human scientist named Dr. Ranatata Akoffer presented a paper to a small group of military planners. She had been studying Vic biology. She noticed something nobody else had. What? The Vicks aren't individuals. Inside every single Vic is a biological network, a kind of living fungus that connects them to every other Vic in the galaxy. They share thoughts, memories, plans. When one Vic learns something, every Vic learns it within minutes. They're one giant mind wearing trillions of bodies. Mara frowned. The conquered knows this.
Yes.
But the conquered thought it made the Vicks unstoppable. Dr. Akoffer saw the same fact and reached the opposite conclusion. She said, if the Vicks are one mind, that mind is a single target. You don't need to destroy their worlds. You need to destroy the one thing that holds them together. The belief that they're one. I nodded. She proposed a language weapon, a message written in molecular structure that could enter the hive mind and rewrite a single core assumption. Mara stared at me. You're telling me that humanity spent 40 years building a weapon that convinces every Vic in the galaxy that they're the only Vic left? Yes. She leaned back, ran a hand through her hair. That's not a weapon. That's a ghost. It's both. I glanced at the timer. 5 hours, 12 minutes. Outside, the Perseverance was waiting. And somewhere in the darkness, the Vicks were still counting down to an end they couldn't see coming. But conflict was already brewing, because the conquered hadn't just demanded vengeance. They had demanded control. And when they realized what humanity had done, without their permission, without their fleets, without their authority, they wouldn't applaud. They would panic. And panic, in a galaxy of 12 armed species, was a much faster weapon than patience. The Perseverance filled the viewport, a long dark sword of metal and light floating against the stars. Its hangar bay doors opened, a rectangle of warm light in the void. As we slid inside, Mara was still processing. A language weapon, she said quietly. Rewriting their identity. That's why you smiled. Not because you're cruel. Because you knew something they didn't. Exactly. The shuttle settled onto the deck. Hydraulics hissed. Outside, crew members approached with equipment and salutes. But Mara didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on me. Who carried it in? She asked. You said we send a person. Not a ship. Not a missile. A person. I stood up. Her name was Juno Hale. And you need to hear her story before the timer hit 0. We walked through the Perseverance's corridors, gray metal, low lights, the quiet hum of a warship at standby. Officers nodded as we passed. They didn't know what was coming. None of them did. Only 7 people on Earth had known. Now, 8. Soon the whole ship would learn. I led Mara to my quarters. The door slid shut behind us. I poured 2 cups of black coffee, handed her one, and sat down. Juno was dying, I said. An illness no medicine could cure. 6 months left. She could have spent those months with her family. Instead, she volunteered. Mara's hand tightened around her cup. The scientists wove the language weapon into her cells, her bones, her blood. She became a walking carrier. Then we sent her to a black market zone, where the Vicks collected living specimens. She let herself be captured. She let herself be captured.
Yes.
They took her to their home world, Xanla, deep into the central hive spire. They studied her for 7 days. Every breath, every touch, every hair she shed, the weapon moved from her into their environment, into their fungal network, into the hive mind itself. Mara set down her coffee. Her hands were shaking. She knew she wouldn't come back. She knew. I pulled up the timer on my wrist. 4 hours, 42 minutes. On the 7th day, I continued, she died. Her last recording was short. She said to tell her mother the bread always tasted like home. To tell her brother to be a good teacher. To tell the people of Kepler's Reach that she remembered them. and to tell the Vix, when they were gone, that she was sorry. The room was silent. Mara didn't cry, but her eyes were wet. "Sir," she said finally, "you've been carrying this for months." The letter to her mother. The memory. All of it. Yes. Who else knows her name? 7 people. Now 8. Mara stood up, walked to the viewport. The stars were steady and cold. "The Conquered is going to be terrified when they find out," she said. "Not just of what we did, of how we did it. Quietly, patiently, without asking permission. I know. They'll see us as a threat. Some of them will want to move against us before we move against them." I nodded. "That's the conflict coming, Mara. Not with the Vix, they're already finished. But with the Conquered. 12 species who just realized the youngest, crudest apes at the table have been holding a knife they never saw." She turned to face me. "Do we have contingencies?" I held her gaze. "We have 93. Her breath caught. "1 for every non-human species in the Conquered," I said. "Built over 40 years. Quiet. Careful. Never used. Never even spoken of until now." "Sir, if the Conquered learns that, they will learn. I'll tell them myself when I go back to the Obsidian Spire. Not as a threat. As a warning. We don't want to use them. But if any species decides to follow the Vix example, if they strike us thinking we're weak, they'll find out exactly how patient humanity can be." Mara stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "The Council won't sleep tonight," she said. "No," I agreed. "Neither will we." On the main screen of the Perseverance, the timer ticked down. 4 hours. 12 minutes. 11. Somewhere on Xantha, the hive mind was beginning to fracture. Vix were already speaking to each other, confused, reaching out, finding only silence in return. And somewhere in the Obsidian Spire, the High Council was already arguing about the human who had smiled and walked away. They didn't know about the 93 plans yet. They would. And when they did, the galaxy would face its greatest test since the Conquered began. Not fire. Not war.
But fear.
The fear of a quiet predator who had just shown its teeth. The timer read 3 hours, 51 minutes. Mara hadn't left my quarters. She stood at the viewport, arms crossed, watching the stars slide past. The Perseverance was holding position at the edge of neutral space, close enough to observe, far enough to run if needed. "You said 93 contingencies," she said without turning around. "1 for every species. Does that include the Threns? They've been our trading partners for 30 years. "Yes." "The Kelva? They sent doctors to help with the plague on Mars." "Yes." She turned. Her face was pale. "Sir, that's not defense planning. That's paranoia at a scale I can't comprehend." I leaned back in my chair. 40 years ago, when we first walked into the Conquered, we were the newest species at the oldest table. Everyone was older, wiser, stronger. They looked at us like children who'd found a gun they didn't understand. And you decided to prove them right? I decided to prove them wrong. Not by building weapons first. By building options first. The 93 contingencies aren't attack plans. They're survival plans. Ways to make sure that if any species decided to do what the Vix did, to wipe us out preemptively, we wouldn't just roll over. Mara sat down across from me. "The Council won't see the difference." "I know. Thassan will call it a threat. Kiva will call it proof that we can't be trusted. Some of them will demand we destroy every file, every sample, every scrap of research." "I know. And if we refuse?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I pulled up a second screen on my wrist, a different timer. This one wasn't counting down. It was counting up. 40 years, 3 months, 11 days. The age of the contingency program. "We won't refuse," I said quietly. "We'll destroy everything. The weapons, the research, the biological samples. All of it. Within a month of today, the 93 plans will exist only in the memories of 7 people, and now you." Mara frowned. "Then why tell the Council at all? Why not keep it secret forever?" I stood up, walked to the viewport beside her. "Because secrets between allies become knives between enemies. The Conquered just watched us erase a species without firing a single shot. They're terrified. If we pretend we have no other plans, they'll assume we're lying. They'll dig. They'll spy. They'll eventually find something, or imagine they have, and the trust will rot from the inside. So, you're giving them the truth to take away their fear? I'm giving them the truth to give them a choice. We'll destroy the plans openly. Let them watch. Let them verify. And then we'll say, we had the power to hide this forever.
We chose not to.
Now what kind of allies do you want to be? Mara was silent for a long moment. The timer on my wrist ticked down. 3 hours, 28 minutes. Sir, she said finally, there's something you haven't told me. Something in your voice when you said, the work is already done. What is it? I looked at her. She was sharp. Too sharp to miss the weight I'd been carrying. Juno's mission, I said slowly, was supposed to take 30 days. The weapon would spread through the hive mind, quiet and invisible. No one would feel a thing until the final moment. But I pulled up a file on my wrist. A sealed report, eyes only, classification level above top secret. On day 22, something went wrong. The VIX detected a fragment of the weapon in their network. They didn't understand what it was, but they started isolating sections of the hive mind, quarantining entire colonies. Mara's eyes widened. They were going to stop it. They were going to try. So Juno did something she wasn't ordered to do. Something she wasn't even supposed to be able to do. I paused. The weight of the next words pressed against my chest. She accelerated the weapon, manually, from inside the hive spire, using her own body as a broadcast amplifier. Mara's hand went to her mouth. That's why she died on day 7 instead of day 30. Not because the VIX killed her, because she chose to burn through her own life to make sure the weapon finished before their quarantine could stop it. The timer ticked. 3 hours, 12 minutes. She gave every remaining hour she had, I said, so that the VIX wouldn't have a single moment to save themselves. Mara stared at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sir, what else aren't you telling me? I looked at the sealed report on my wrist. At the final line, written in red ink by a scientist who had watched Juno die. Subject's final transmission contained an anomaly. Pattern does not match any known weapon behavior. Suggest immediate review. I closed the file. That, I said, is a question I don't have an answer to.
Not yet.
The timer ticked on, and somewhere in the dark, something else was counting down. The timer reached 2 hours, 44 minutes. Mara stood frozen by the viewport, her arms wrapped around herself. The sealed report I'd shown her was still glowing on my wrist screen. Those red letters. Pattern does not match any known weapon behavior. You think something else happened, she said. Something Juno didn't tell us. I think Juno was dying, I replied. I think she was alone inside the most hostile place in the galaxy. And I think in her final hours, she made a decision none of us predicted. What decision? I stood up, walked to the small safe bolted to the wall of my quarters. Entered a code. The door hissed open. Inside was a single item, a small glass vial, no bigger than my thumb, filled with a faintly glowing amber liquid. Dr. Akoffer found this in Juno's tissue samples after her death, I said. It wasn't part of the weapon. It wasn't in any of the original biological modifications. It appeared spontaneously in the last 6 hours of Juno's life. Mara stepped closer. Her eyes were fixed on the vial. What is it? We don't know, but we know what it does. I set the vial on the table between us. The amber light pulsed once, slowly, like a heartbeat. When we exposed a sample of Vic fungal tissue to this compound, I said, the tissue didn't die. It didn't unravel like the weapon was supposed to do. It changed. Changed how? It started growing.
Not randomly.
Intentionally. As if it was trying to form something. A structure. A message. We couldn't read it. But Dr. Akoffer said something before she died last year. She said, the weapon was designed to end a hive mind. But Juno turned it into something else. Something that doesn't just destroy. Something that remembers. Mara sat down heavily. Her face was ashen. Sir, are you telling me that Juno Hale didn't just kill the Vix? That she did something more? I picked up the vial. The amber light pulsed again. Faster this time. In 2 hours and 43 minutes, I said, the Vic's dominion will cease to exist. The hive mind will shatter. Every Vic will wake up alone. That part of the plan is working exactly as designed. I held the vial up to the light. But somewhere inside that collapse, somewhere in the space between one mind becoming trillions of isolated minds, this thing is waiting. We planted it without knowing. Juno created it without understanding. And when the hive mind breaks, what? Mara whispered, the anomaly will activate. And we have no idea what it will do. The timer ticked down. 2 hours, 31 minutes. Mara looked at me with something like horror. You're telling me we might have just traded one threat for another? I'm telling you that Juno Hale was braver and stranger than any of us knew. She went into the dark to save us. And in her final act, she reached for something none of her training prepared her for. I put the vial back in the safe, locked it. When the hive mind breaks, we'll watch. We'll record. And then we'll find out what Juno left behind. Mara stood up. Her hands were steady now. Her eyes were clear. Take me to the bridge, sir, she said. I want to be there when it happens. I nodded.
We walked out together.
The corridors of the Perseverance were quiet. The crew didn't know what was coming. They only knew something had shifted in the galaxy. On the bridge, Captain Brant stepped aside as I approached the main view screen. The map of Vic space glowed red. Hundreds of dots, hundreds of worlds, trillions of lives. The timer read 2 hours, 11 minutes. Commander, Brant said quietly, we're picking up unusual transmissions from the Vic home world. Not military. Not coordinated. Just voices. Asking where everyone went. I nodded. The fracture is starting. On the screen, the first red turned gray. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. Mara stood beside me. Her hand brushed mine, not romantic, just human. Just two people watching the end of something enormous. Sir, she said, whatever the anomaly does, we face it together. The timer ticked. 1 hour, 58 minutes. And somewhere in the dark heart of Xantha, inside a dying hive spire, a single amber light began to pulse in rhythm with a heartbeat that had stopped 8 months ago. Juno Hale's heartbeat. The galaxy would never be the same. The timer reached 0. On the main screen of the Perseverance, the last red turned gray. The Vic's dominion was gone. Not in fire, not in ruin, just in silence. 12 counselors on the Obsidian Spire watched their own maps in disbelief. The galaxy held its breath. Then something unexpected happened. The amber vial in my safe began to glow, not pulsing now, but steady, warm, like a small sun waking from a long sleep. I felt it before I saw it. A warmth spreading through the ship, through the bridge, through every console and every heart. Commander, Corporal L said, his voice shaking. I'm picking up a transmission. Not Vic. Not any known species. It's coming from everywhere at once. Put it on speakers. Static filled the bridge. Then a voice, soft, calm, achingly familiar. This is Juno Hale. If you're hearing this, the hive mind is broken. And I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the whole truth. Mara grabbed my arm. I couldn't move. The weapon wasn't just a weapon. Dr. Akoffer designed it to destroy. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't erase an entire people, even the Vics. So I changed it. In the last hours of my life, I rewrote the code.
Not to kill them.
To wake them up. The screen flickered. The gray dots on the map began turning green, one by one, slowly, deliberately. Every Vic is still alone. They'll never be a hive mind again. That part is done. But they're not empty. I gave them something new. The one thing the hive never let them have. I whispered. What?
Choice.
Each Vic now has its own mind, its own will, its own chance to decide what kind of being it wants to be. Some may choose violence. Some may choose peace. Most will choose simply to live. But whatever they choose, it will be theirs. Not the hive's. Not mine. Theirs. The bridge was silent. Captain Brant had tears on her cheeks. Mara was gripping my hand so hard it hurt. Commander Vance, Elia, you carried my letter. You carried my memory. Now carry this truth. No species is born evil. They become evil when they forget they have a choice. I didn't end the Vix. I gave them back their choices. And I gave the galaxy a chance to be better than it was. The transmission faded. The green dots on the map held steady. Hundreds of worlds, trillions of lives. Each one alone for the first time, each one free. Mara turned to me. She didn't destroy them. She saved them. I sank into my chair. 40 years of planning. 40 years of waiting. 40 years of believing we were building a weapon, and a dying woman had turned it into a gift. She was always braver than us, I said. She saw a future we couldn't imagine. Captain Brandt stepped forward. Commander, the Conquered is hailing us. Thassan wants to know what just happened. I looked at the green dots, at the warm amber light fading in my quarters, at Mara's tear-streaked face. Tell him, I said, that Juno Hale sent one last message. Tell him the Vix aren't gone. They're just free. And tell him humanity didn't come to conquer. We came to remind the galaxy what it forgot. And what's that? I stood up, smiled for the first time in 8 months. That the best weapon isn't the one that destroys. It's the one that makes destruction unnecessary. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed brighter. Somewhere on Xantha, a lone Vix stepped out of the hive's spire, looked up at the sky for the first time with its own eyes, and breathed air that belonged to no one but itself. The galaxy would take years to understand what had happened. Wars might still come. Fears might still linger. But on that day, in that moment, silence became peace. And Juno Hale, Baker's daughter, volunteer, ghost and savior, finally went home. I delivered her letter to her mother the next morning. The woman read it in silence, then folded it carefully and placed it on the shelf behind the counter, next to a small jar of amber honey that caught the sunlight. Heart of a lion, her mother said softly. She always had it. Yes, I said. She always did. I walked out of the bakery into the rain. And for the first time in 40 years, I didn't check my wrist for a timer. The counting was over. The choosing had begun.
The end.